Thanks for coming to chat with me. It's been long overdue,
It has been long overdue. I think we've been trying to schedule one of these for years.
and you're not kidding by years right there. You and I are two of the longest politics streamers on the platform. I don't think people know that.
No, I don't think so either. Um, I wanted to have a conversation with you because I think you're one of the more professional, like respectful um, streamers with integrity, and so I am kind of fed up with a lot of the other leftist Twitch streamers out there. So much toxic negativity and stuff, and I think you're more into like hardcore politics, like counting votes and stuff like that. Whereas I think a lot of other people are more interested in esoteric, theoretical mumbo jumbo.
Yeah, hey, I appreciate that. And I know you share that interest as well. So it's always a pleasure to chat with you on this stuff. And I wish more people were like us and actually cared about the comings and goings of our government, how it worked, right? They all seem to have solutions without understanding how any of it works, which is fascinating to me.
Right. Totally.
But I agree. And that's why I was like, unless you wanted to start on another topic, I was just going to talk about Twitch and how politics is on here. Is that cool with you to start with that?
For sure, yeah.
So, I mean, I'm curious, like, what your thoughts are on the scene because you don't engage too much with Twitch politics, if I'm not incorrect about that. Like, there are conservative streams you could go on that you don't seem to. Like, you don't go on Killer Steven's stream. You'll pop in there, you'll raid over there once in a while, but you're not like hanging out constantly with the Twitch politics scene. Is that on purpose?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, I always wanted to have my own Twitch stream so that I could be the host and talk and stuff like that. And I just don't enjoy, um, you know, talking with other people because then I end up sitting there in silence and I'm just like, what am I doing? I'm sitting here in silence, like listening to a bunch of other people talk when like I wanted to say some things.
Yeah, it's true. And there's this trend of these podcasts now with like let's pack as many people as we can in here and try to get them to fight over as much as possible instead of focusing on any sort of discourse or listening to one another. And I know you're not a big fan of that either.
No, absolutely, and that's why I wanted to have a one-on-one conversation with you because you really can't get into the issues very deeply with these eight-member panels, and it's not productive, and the people are immature, and I think having like a one-on-one between me and you is just going to be so much night and day between what the typical Twitch politics panel is. So I don't have anything against like any like panels, specifically. It's just more of like a general feeling I have about the panels, and it's like I can stream for hours and hours and hours just myself, not taking any calls, not doing any panels, and that's what I like doing. So that's what I do more often. But you're not necessarily a huge panel guy either, are you?
I'm not. No, it's for the same reasons you just outlined. Like I'd rather understand and listen to other people. And so I find myself being quiet on the panels more often than not as I'm kind of taking in what people are saying and thinking, "Wow, it's interesting," because I think that's the advantage of talking to anybody, right? It's not to talk at them. That's pointless, Like you could do that in the mirror if you want to look amazing, but and I'm not into the whole entertainment value of it either, right? I genuinely want to know what people have to say and what they think. So it's just there's a trend of trying to get too many people on the panels lately. Now, maybe if the panels were 2v2 or 3v3, I'd be more interested. But no, everybody seems to think 4v4 is the best, and I just find it chaotic and not accomplishing much. I actually think
Right.
it has a detrimental effect, honestly.
Oh, for sure. No, for sure. Um, Absolutely, it's a detrimental effect. I mean, even on like look at the way cable news does it, like CNN, Fox News, MSNBC. They'll have at most four people, and maybe on occasion more than that. But typically the panels on like TV are four people. So when you have 8 or 9 people, it's just not productive. And frankly, I think one-on-one discussions are the way to go.
How do you think we help fix this problem? Do you and I just not go on panels? Because I feel like you not going on panels would cause a lot more damage than me not going on panels. But what do you think? How do we fix that?
Um, I would say not going on them, and then I don't necessarily know if there's anything else that we can really do. Like if these people want to have panels constantly, and people on Twitch want to watch them, obviously. I mean, there's streamers that have basically made their entire platform about panels, and they get the viewers, and people like it's I guess it's entertaining to people. So I don't know. I think the best thing we can do is do what we actually do, which is stream most of the time ourselves, talking about hard news, actual politics, real issues, and then getting out there and giving our opinions, and doing more one-on-one type stuff. I'm convinced that people are going to watch me and you have this discussion, and they're going to be like, holy cow, this was so much more professional and respectful and informative and educational. I mean, I know that like when me and Bastiat do one-on-one discussions, people love it with me and Bastiat one-on-one, and people are always asking me to do a one-on-one with Destiny and stuff. And it's like, you get these 8 people on the panel, and then it's just, there's never any depth to it. There's never any back and forth. And then you have people on there that don't really care about the issues and are just there to be jerks or whatever it might be.
Yeah, I like that. So it's just you and I leading by example right here, right now, showing people, hey, look, isn't this entertaining? Do people enjoy this? You could bring 100 people into your chat with this, like
Exactly.
why not just meet with someone one-on-one? And I think it's more, there's more at stake because you can't hide, right? It's you've got time, they've got time, and you get a full understanding of someone's position and where they stand. And you got to do your research if you get in one-on-one with somebody.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And but I think it's almost like it's more fair too, because like with these huge panels, you might have 3 or 4 people each take a jab at you or something, and you only have time to respond to one of them, or you get cut off because other people want to do it. I always feel every single one of these huge panels where there's like 8 people or 9 people, I always feel that I didn't have enough time to adequately explain my thought process on a particular thing.
Same. I always walk away saying, damn, I wish I could have said this or that, but I don't want to interrupt people, and it's like the only way you get any words in on those panels if you jump on the end of someone's sentence and start going. Why you seem to keep like so calm on the panels too. I've never seen you lose it. I've never seen you insult somebody. How are you able to do that? Because I think it's a wonderful example that people I know on my side overlook because they're so upset with the things you're saying. But I'm saying, look how calm Lecture is. He's never taken the bait. So what do you think it is?
Well, I really appreciate you saying that. Honestly, it's because I've made a conscious effort to be like that over many years. I mean, I guess I've been interested in politics since I was like 18. And I realized like early on in my political interest that politics is one of those subjects where people get angry and people get very emotional, and it can be very uncomfortable and stuff. And so from the very beginning, I realized that it's a topic that people have a hard time talking about. And so I've made a conscious effort over many years to talk about these issues without getting angry and becoming too emotional and things like that. So it's literally just been a conscious effort on my part over many years to try to maintain. And I'm not actually perfect. I actually have lost my cool and insulted people, but typically I try to apologize. Like I've apologized to people like directly on panels for, calling them something or, whatever it might be.
And are you like that when you talk politics with people in person, if you
Yeah.
do at all? Or do you avoid politics in real life?
No, I do it in person. And actually that's where I started. That's where I started with the effort to try to be real reasonable and rational and calm and not get too overwhelmed is in person. Talking politics. I mean, I don't know, I would say you are similarly calm, cool, calm and collected. I've never really seen you get too emotional or lose it on anybody?
Yeah, I've got the top clip on Killer Steven's channel with like 12,000 views of me calling DBO some names, but that was like 2 a.m. after, hearing him ramble on and on. But I, like you, I make a conscious decision before I get into the debates to say, let's keep it cool. And I actually set things for myself even further. I say, I want to tell somebody, hey, I didn't know that. I like to say that to people on the other side to show an example to everybody like, hey, I didn't know that. Hey, thanks for telling me about that. Or you know what? I kind of agree with you on that little thing. And it doesn't even have to be something with politics, right? Like, yeah, blue's the best color, whatever. Just to show that you don't have to fight with everybody all the time over everything. You know what I mean? So
Absolutely. Well, I think it's an effective way to argue too. It's not like I do it just for all of these, wonderful motives and stuff. Like, I think it's actually effective argument tactic to actually not lose your cool.
absolutely, yeah. I mean, I don't think you look good when you do it, but it's the medium that we're on encourages you to be more and more volatile in order to get people excited, and where it ends, I don't know, but I'm glad that there are cooler heads like yourself and I out there, at least trying to calm things down a little bit. You know what I mean?
Oh, for sure. I mean, I sometimes feel that like the Twitch politics scene is so disconnected from reality, and so disconnected from the real world. It's almost like mind-boggling to me how disconnected the discourse is on Twitch politics. I don't know. There's probably multitudes of reasons why, but like, it really is like, especially for somebody like me, maybe not as much you, but for somebody like me, like the predominant way people act on Twitch and the predominant political opinions are just way outside what would be considered acceptable in Montana, for example.
Yeah, I mean, even here in LA, I don't run into people with some of these views, and I'm shocked, right? And I kind of go in there and accept that these people are under the umbrella of my party mostly, but they're extremists, and these opinions just don't get anywhere. I look at it as the internet has been gerrymandered to some degree, and you have to be more and more extreme to get attention in politics online. But you're right, it doesn't translate to the real world. I mean, if you think about it, on the left, I think DSA, Democratic Socialists of America, have 60,000 members nationwide. I mean, that's nothing. That's a drop in the bucket out of 60 million plus people that voted for Hillary. So even paying attention to them is pointless. And so this is why I personally don't engage. I mean, do you ever go into any of these leftist streams or anything?
Oh yeah, for sure. I'll watch them, and it blows me away.
And I agree with you. This last year of the primary has really opened my eyes to just how out of touch people are, right? Like, I hear a lot of people say about you, Lecture Fan is a character. And my mind is blown. I go, how do you think this guy's a character? This guy represents millions of people in this country. You're just not going outside and talking to people. So I find it very strange how many people think you're a character. Why do you think people think that?
Well, I think it's just because they're so disconnected from, I guess, average Americans, or I guess maybe conservative Americans or Republicans. I find it mind-boggling. I mean, I like sometimes the reaction I get on some of these panels, and I'll say something which, all of my acquaintances in real life agree with. All of the people around me, the vast majority of people in Montana, we all say believe something. And I'll say it on a Twitch panel, and people go, oh, no, you did not just, what? That's so weird. You have to be trolling. You have to be trolling. And it's like, dude, I'm not trolling. This is this is a normal standard, belief. I think it's because, I think it's the mainstream media. It is Hollywood, music, art, the academy, universities, the school systems are all kind of pushing sort of this one narrative, which is why, I mean, you could it's mind-boggling that Donald Trump won, considering he had 95% negative news media coverage, and it's mind-boggling that Donald Trump is even still at 40 or 42% approval rating, be considering the way Hollywood has treated him and the mainstream media has treated him, and there's this massive cultural and political disconnect between that's why they're like the Trump's base is referred to as like the forgotten men and women.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you that there is a lack of representation in all of those things you mentioned, Hollywood and such. I just I don't know. I don't know what the explanation is for that. The only thing I can think of is that Donald Trump is very combative, and so people feel they have to fight with him instead of just getting along with him in order to attract attention. He takes the bait so easily for fighting with people that if you start something and you attack him, it seems to get a rise out of people. So I don't know, but
Well,
yeah.
why do you think people? I actually have another theory about why people would say that I'm a character, but I'm curious about why do you think that?
I
Not
think that they
not that you think I am a character, but why do you think other people think that?
Well, yeah, I don't, and I actually come to your defense on it, saying you got to be kidding me. This I've known this guy since he was streaming in front of 10 people playing games, and he's exactly the same. He hasn't changed
Right.
a single bit, right? And I think I'm one of the few people that can say that. And unfortunately, I can't take people back in time to see you doing that, so they just don't believe it. But I think it's what you just said, that they're just not interacting with anyone like you, and they're not stepping out of their narrative, their paradigm, their view of the world, right? And so they just can't even imagine that anything outside of their view of things exists, and especially something so different. And that's to their detriment, I think. And I wish more people would accept you for who you are and then try to find common ground or areas that they could build on. That's always been my approach.
I think that's great. I think that's absolutely great. I think there's a huge divide between, city and rural. And so, yeah, if you're in a big city, you may not ever meet somebody like me who's from a rural, area with more rural values. And then if you're in a big city and you're watching national media and national, art and culture and Hollywood, and you go to your university and all your professors feel the same way, and all your professors teach this, and you see it in Hollywood, you see it in national news media, and then you don't know anybody personally. I think that's what drives it.
I agree, and the interesting thing is people on the left would flip it on you, and for example, like with trans rights, they would say, well, these people are in conservative areas and they're simply not experiencing trans individuals, so they have a disconnect from it. So it happens on both sides, and I at least I recognize that and I accept it, and I don't think anybody's to blame. You know what I mean? Like you said, we're in different regions of the country and we have a different our news is different, the people around us are different. I think that's the beauty of Twitch, to be honest, that you and
Right.
I and others can bump into each other. It forces us all together, unlike the real world.
Totally. Well, and even like people from around the world, like I think it's so cool when, people in chat are like, "Oh, I'm from the UK, or I'm from Ireland, or I'm from the Netherlands," and then another person says, "Oh, I'm from Costa Rica, I'm from the Philippines," and we're all in the same place chatting and stuff. It's really it's obviously something that's only happened in our modern day and age, and I think it's a good thing that we can hear other people's viewpoints, from around the country and around the world.
I agree, and sadly, people are going to react negatively at first to anything that's different. But hey, you and I are in the front, and we're kind of exposing people to things, and maybe it chips away at their idea of things a little bit, even if they get angry about it. That's just kind of how I see the reality of it. But let me ask you, what do you think the future is of our space here on Twitch? Because we got this election coming up, and we have Destiny probably leaving when he loses his partnership on the 9th. I mean, what do you see the future of Twitch politics like 6 months from now? Any different?
Well, I thought about this a lot since your tweet and you're talking about it on your stream earlier. I do think that there are some people on Twitch politics that will see sort of a reduction in viewership. Maybe after the election, after Destiny leaves completely. I don't know if Destiny will ever leave completely. I always thought wow, Destiny, if he's actually going to get his money making ability taken away from Twitch, he should just completely leave Twitch. Like, why would you stream on Twitch for free when they won't pay you? And then somebody said, well, he can't really because Twitch is so dominant in the live streaming space, so he might be forced to continue to stream on it even though he's not getting paid. But dude, I honestly, here's my real thoughts. I think that live streaming is continuing to grow and grow and grow. The younger generations would rather watch a Twitch stream than cable TV or Netflix even. I feel like, you know, me and you got in on the ground floor of Apple in the 80s. You know, like we got in at the very beginning of a much larger movement of going to live streaming, because people love the live stream because there's nothing else like it. It's so genuine, it's so real. You can interact with the actual person, and Twitch politics has done nothing but grow. I mean, it's crazy what the Twitch politics scene in 2015 was like. There was nobody really even focused on politics. Like Destiny would talk politics, but it was never, you know, it wasn't his focus at the time. And now you've got like literally hundreds of people that just focus on Twitch politics. And you know, maybe we'll see a reduction after the election, but you know, maybe not. Maybe it's just going to get more intense after the election, especially if there's a bunch of lawsuits going and recounts and stuff like that. And I mean, I think it could go anywhere post-election, but I don't know. I've seen nothing but slow and steady growth since 2015. You know, and I don't know if I don't necessarily see that changing. I think live streaming as a whole is going to continue to grow and continue to grow as more younger generations come up, and as the older generations pass away. It's just continue to grow and grow and grow. I feel like we got in on the ground floor of a big, huge movement, and as live streaming itself grows, I think the politics space will as well. Do you agree or disagree with that?
I disagree. I mean, I agree. I do think that the space is going to continue to grow. I am curious about the level of excitement and interest if the election turns out one way, right? So I do think Donald Trump is exciting, and if for some reason he's not the president January 21st, I could see people disengaging and saying, well, we're all done here, or hey, nothing exciting to see, I'll come back in 4 years, something like that. But like you said, there could be lawsuits and there could be all sorts of drama that keeps going no matter what happens. Maybe Donald Trump wins re-election and the Dems get the Senate. Now you got all sorts of drama that's going to happen. But the Destiny question is interesting. Will he stay? And that is a fair point that that person told you. Like, he's got, 300,000 followers on here or something. He'd be silly to not at least re-stream here. I just wonder how much engagement he has. When you talk to people on Twitch politics in the audience and you ask them, how'd you find about Twitch politics? Most of them say Hassan and Destiny, right? So losing one of those people seems like a huge deal to me, but I agree. People like you and I who love this stuff and will continue to do exactly what we do. We've got our user bases where I rarely see the people in my channel and other streams because they're just kind of interested in what we're doing here and they're not finding that anywhere else, right? And I'm sure you see similar things in your channel. So you and I think are okay, and we did get in early. But I worry about some of these younger people, right? Because I want to see other voices come up and I want to see other people join us. So I kind of worry. The other thing I worry about is the rules on Twitch, right? Strangely enough, Destiny being banned essentially, and Twitch banning Donald Trump, the first social media platform to purposefully ban an account of Donald Trump. Terms of service don't allow for political emotes. So I wonder what our future really is on here. I mean, do you see yourself being a full-time streamer one day? Your sub count's up there to start to got you scratching your head, wondering if you could.
True. I've wanted to have my own talk show since, you know, I was a kid listening to Rush Limbaugh with my dad in the truck going to work. But I would love to be full-time Twitch someday. But you know, it's so risky. Like even if I was making enough right now that I could actually survive, like that would be so dumb for me to give up, you know, a career that I've worked on for 30 plus years to try to get this career built up, especially when I could be banned at any second.
True.
You know, that's so risky. So I don't see it happening until it's like way, way, way far along just because of the just easily just banned so quickly and it's all gone. Like, imagine giving up your career to go full time Twitch and then, you make a mistake, you say the wrong thing, and boom, you're done. Like, I think it's amazing. I think it's incredible that I've never been banned. But from the very beginning, I've known that like politics is a touchy subject, and I've, tried to stay within terms of service, and so far so good.
I think it's even more so that you've limited your interactions with certain people on this platform. And I'm learning that lesson recently myself, that some of these people are just angry and their whole mission becomes removing you from the platform. And unfortunately, Destiny ran into that and found that out recently. So I think that's more responsible for your longevity on here, is just you're distancing yourself from these people. Not that I think your opinions are toxic or worth banning, but I've seen people banned like Red Pill Gaming, right? For, saying things that a lot of people are saying out there that you could hear on Tucker Carlson any night of the week, or Laura Ingraham.
Right. Here's what I hope, though. I hope that the 2020 election results are so resoundingly in favor of Trump and the Republicans that all of these leftist corporations that have been supporting BLM and supporting, censorship and banning conservatives, they all realize that, wow, we actually are disconnected. I mean, these big tech companies are just as disconnected from, a lot of Americans' political beliefs as these Twitch users are that think I'm a character. And so, especially if Trump, I mean, I don't know if you saw this article about the Trump administration is looking at an antitrust lawsuit against Facebook. I mean, that could be massive news. That could break at any second. And the federal government filing an antitrust case against Facebook would totally shake up the campaign again, and could potentially have huge impacts on some of the censorship items. And Trump did an executive order on Section 230. You've got a lot of Republicans in the Senate and the House that are worried about censorship on tech. And so, and then you've got me here with all of my influential power on Twitch. I'm proposing a new federal cause of action with treble damages and punitive damages and attorney's fees to authorize social media users to file suit if they're banned for political reasons. But not that that's ever going to happen. But I think you could potentially see more of a opening up towards more free speech and free thought post 2020 election, especially if there's this huge resounding win for the Republicans, and these tech companies know that they're looking at antitrust or potential Section 230 amendments and stuff like that if they continue down this path, to where it's like, and obviously I think it's politically biased, but it's also hitting leftists, and liberals, like, Destiny getting banned, like, when Hassan said something 10 times worse against conservatives, and then Destiny says it, and because it's against the protesters, he gets banned. I don't support that. So it's hurting the people on the left too.
Yeah, and to your last point there, I believe what Destiny said was about rioters, and a lot of people have grouped that in with the protesters, and not to correct you or anything, but I just want to put that out there in general, that
True.
I believe his point was about rioters. But let's shift over to the election if you're cool, unless there's anything else on Twitch politics that you wanted to rap about.
No, that's it.
Okay.
I think it's good. I think we covered it.
Yeah, it's just kind of interesting to hear your thoughts and be able to chat with you and share what I think is what's going on there. But so you just said you think Trump's got this in the bag. I mean, I'm looking at polls, and I know your reaction's going to be, well, look at the polls in 2016, and perhaps you have your doubts about the polls, but I mean, everything is pointing to Biden being up right now. And the only two reasons I see people saying that's not accurate is either faith that the polls are wrong for some reason, that the polling orgs are getting it wrong, or that there's this shy majority, right? That we talked about a little bit. Like, is that essentially your line of thinking? Why Trump is down in so many of these polls?
Well, I guess it's sort of a combination of both. I mean, I think one of the reasons the polls are wrong is because methodological reasons, like they do registered voters instead of likely voters, or they do a small sample size, but also because of the people getting, or maybe they're having a hard time reaching certain groups of voters that I know they do cell phones now, but people don't answer cell phone calls, and I don't know. There's difficulties in the polling in terms of it as a science that make it sort of difficult, which is why you have margins of error, and they admit that they can be off 3 points or 5 points or whatever it might be, which is significant, especially in close elections. I mean, if you've got a poll that shows Biden's up by 5 points and the margin of error is 5 points, it's like the poll doesn't really tell you that much. But I also think there is a significant amount of a shy Trump voter, and I base that on just the fact that I don't know if you've seen those polls. There's actually polls that show that Trump or conservatives are actually scared to share their opinions publicly way more than liberals, for fear of being ostracized or attacked, or and we see it in the news media all the time. I mean, people losing their jobs because they said something in support of Trump, but so I think we live in a situation where you could potentially lose your job and have your life ruined if you support Trump, and then some stranger calls you on the phone and says, "Hey, do you support Trump?" There's a lot of people that are going to say no to that. And I also think that there's a lot of people that are going to vote Trump that don't admit it publicly at all. And in fact, I get that all the time on Twitch. People coming in saying, "Holy cow, lecture, that's amazing that you're willing to go out in public and stand for your beliefs. You're putting yourself out there. You're taking a huge risk. Like, we really appreciate it. Like, I would never do it. I can't do it. But I'm glad that you're doing it." So I don't think there's really much of a doubt that the shy Trump voter is there. Plus, there's problems with the science behind polling. Plus, there's potential actual intentional bias in some of these polls. And so I think all of those things like weigh into it. And you do have to look at history and the polls being wrong in the past, and things like that. So I don't put a lot of stock in the polls. Certainly not previously. We're starting to get to the point where the pollsters actually start wanting to be more accurate because they're getting closer to the election. But I haven't been putting much stock in the polls much before this for all those reasons. Do you disagree with any of that?
I do, but I'm not here to convince you otherwise. I'm more interested in hearing your thoughts on it. My retort to some of that stuff would, it's tough for me to think that someone would be concerned about saying whether or not they support Donald Trump to an anonymous pollster. I understand the concern in public and putting a Trump sign in front of your house, and maybe telling your neighbors and posting about it on Facebook. But I think when it comes to my experience with Trump supporters, they seem pretty out and proud. You know what I'm saying? Like, I've yet to meet a real shy Trump supporter. Maybe they're out there. Maybe I'm just not running in the right circles. But most people who support Donald Trump are pretty proud of it and quite convinced that he's the best solution for the country. So they're not really hiding it. So, and I'm not telling you that you're wrong. I'm just sharing my experience, right, and what I think. As far as the polls methodology and whether or not to trust them, I personally believe that these polling orgs faced an existential threat after 2016 because a lot of people, whether right or wrong, thought that they got it wrong. And, going back on those polls, if you do go back and look at them, they're pretty accurate. I mean, they pretty much called the outcome for the national poll, and they did have some problems on a state level when it came to weighing the amount of education people have, especially attributed to race. And that just wasn't something that was a party fault line in the past. It started in 2008, continued in 2012, and exploded in 2016, where white educated versus white uneducated really was a fault line on for the party. So I believe they've cleaned up their act. So I personally believe in the polls. Now, obviously, they're in favor of the candidate I want to see win. So I could see if I was in your position and my candidate was down, I'd probably be looking for reasons that they're missing something as well. So it is interesting that that the hard part for me is that you have to assume something that you can't prove right now, right? So the numbers show something, but you don't have anything to prove that the numbers are missing something somehow. I mean, or do you?
Well, you do actually. I mean, again, I totally disagree with you that like the polls got it right in 2016. I guess I've seen some people on Twitter make this distinction that well the polls were right. It was just the projections that were wrong, and it's like hello, the projections were all based on the polls, and so I actually went back, you might be right about the national polling, but I don't think that's, quite right. I think the national polling actually had Hillary Clinton, beating Trump in the popular vote even more so than, she did. But more importantly, like I went back and looked at the polling for the states that swung the election, like Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan. And all of the polls prior to the election in those three states had Hillary Clinton up 6, Hillary Clinton up 7, Hillary Clinton up 8, which is a significant amount of, win, outside even more so than the margin of error. And so I think the polls actually did get it wrong. So that is one like piece of actual fact and actual evidence that you could use to say, I don't trust the polls in 2020. But more importantly, there's actually other scientific evidence to support this, which is like I mentioned, there's actually polling that people will actually say that conservatives are concerned about disclosing their political viewpoints because they don't want to get attacked, they don't want to get called names, they don't want to have to deal with all this stuff. So there's actual scientific polling that shows that conservatives and Trump supporters and Republicans are actually not willing to do this. And more importantly, I think you do see some polls out there. You do see some polls out there that actually indicate Trump could win. I mean, the Trafalgar polls or whatever, those have Trump up in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan. I don't know if all three of them, but sort of some of them over the last. Rasmussen had Trump with a 53% approval rating recently, and Rasmussen was one of the most accurate pollsters in 2016. And then you've also seen a lot of polling where Trump is getting Trump was leading amongst Latinos in Florida. Do you remember that poll? There was a poll that showed Trump actually had more than 50% support amongst Latinos in Florida. And then you've also seen polls that show Donald Trump getting 30 to 35% of the black vote. And it's like, if either of those things are true, or if Rasmussen is right, then all of this stuff is way off. And so I just don't think that you can. I mean, here's my question for you. Why would you emotionally put yourself into this position of expecting a Biden victory, because it's going to be so hard to deal with if he doesn't win? Why don't you like prepare for the worst and hope for the best?
Well, I'm a glass half full kind of guy, so I like to be optimistic. I like to look through rose-colored glasses. So I do have scenarios where Donald Trump wins, and I think it is possible. I don't think it's impossible. A lot can change in the next 42 days or whatever, 44 days, 43 days. But I look at other factors too, like money being raised. I mean, Donald Trump is just getting whooped on when it comes to money being raised. And it's just, that's a figure you can't deny, right? There's no hiding there. There's no mystery. I mean, look at the month of August where Donald Trump and RNC related orgs raised about 200 million, and Joe Biden and the Dems raised 360 million. So these are other indicators that I look at and say, well, the enthusiasm seems to be on Biden's side.
Okay, well, the easy retort to that is that Hillary Clinton way outraised Bill Clinton or Donald Trump. Hillary Clinton had so much more money than Trump did, like twice as much or something. It was crazy.
You can also say that there's limited ad markets out there, right? Everything's pretty saturated now. And I saw one description here. It's like firing a shotgun at a pinhead at this point. Everybody's pretty much decided. There's a very tiny little slice of undecided voters out there. But I think that money actually trickles down into the Senate races, which is what I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on. Because this RBG seat just kind of throws the Senate into the spotlight now. And if you were to look at things like Cook Political Report and Real Clear Politics. They've got a whole bunch of Republican seats that were considered toss-ups. Are you thinking the Republicans hold on to the Senate as well?
Yeah, probably, but I think the Supreme Court seat helps Republicans, and frankly,
More,
I think
more
yeah,
than Democrats?
yeah, absolutely,
Okay.
and frankly, uh, one of the reasons Donald Trump won in 2016 was because there was an open Supreme Court seat, and that was hugely beneficial to Trump. A lot of people voted for Trump solely on the basis of there being an open Supreme Court seat. And Senate and
True.
Republican Senate candidates for a very long time have brought up the issue of the Supreme Court. And I think that like for the Republicans and for the conservatives, like the Supreme Court is almost everything because it's the Constitution and it's the rule of law and it's respect for the judiciary and it's stability in our country and it's following the Constitution, and it's allowing people to have a democratic vote instead of having nine people in robes making decisions. And it's this sort of really powerful thing that drives the conservative base really, really strongly. And it's a very powerful thing for the whereas for Democrats and people on the left, it's nothing more than abortion. It's just, oh, we're going to lose abortion. We got to protect abortion, which I don't think abortion is as strong of a motivator for somebody on the left as the Constitution is for somebody on the right.
Interesting. I would agree with you that in 2016, a lot more Republicans were voting because of that open seat. Now we'll talk about that, the RBG seat and all that, because I am curious to hear your thoughts on that. But I actually saw even a poll that said 8% more Republicans cared about it in 2016. And now in 2020, actually, the poll was showing that 8% more Democrats care about it because they're concerned. They're scared, right? So I personally think it's much more motivating to fight and try to get the Supreme Court back in your favor than it is to go from 6-3 to 7-2. I don't see how that's more motivating than trying to get the Supreme Court back. Do you disagree on that?
Well, I guess the assumption in your question is that the Republicans and the GOP confirm the nominee before the election this year.
Well, it sounds like they're full steam ahead after the statements that came out today from Mitt Romney and a few others saying, let's do this.
Right. So it pretty much seems like it's a done deal that the Republicans are going to confirm.
I think so. And if anybody out there is doubting that, I think they're living in a fantasy world.
Well, I agree. I mean, when you've even got Cory Gardner and Romney and stuff, like I was a little bit nervous about Cory Gardner, just because he's up for election in sort of a purple state, but he came through and
Purple. That's
is it?
pretty blue at this point. He's quite behind, but yeah, it's a risky move. I don't know.
Well,
It's a
I
Hail
mean,
Mary from him. But I was wondering about the timing. And Mitch McConnell hasn't said for sure if the actual vote will take place after the election, but he definitely seems like he's about to start the process at the very least. And it seems like they have the votes. And look, I try to tell people that this is years of conservative activism that have led to this. This isn't some sort of last couple of years stunt or something. This is years of activism beyond the Senate. People like yourself who have been out there, and there's been all these March for Life rallies and such, right? And people on the left just started getting engaged in 2016, really.
right. I agree with that, and so you're absolutely right. And so this is the culmination of decades and decades of conservative activism and Federalist Society work and Republicans in the Senate and the you know presidency and everything else. But
Yeah.
I mean, okay, so let's just assume, I guess, that the Republicans and Trump nominates an originalist, constitutionalist justice, and they're confirmed. I think then that raises. I don't think voters are going to be just voters aren't going to be thinking, oh, okay, well now we've got a 6-3 court. So I guess it doesn't really matter that much. I guess I'm not going to vote for Trump again. I don't think that's the thought process of a Republican base supporter. First of all, it wouldn't be a 6-3 court. It would be at it would be a very shaky, potentially a 5-4 court. Because Roberts is, I think, shown himself to not be an originalist or a constitutionalist, and most of, I think, the conservative base is very, very unhappy with Roberts. And one of the things about Supreme Court nominees is that conservatives have been burned time and time and time again. I can't tell you how many Republican presidents have nominated Supreme Court justices who turn out to be liberals or leftists, whatever you want to call them. And so, regardless of who this is, people are still nervous about Kavanaugh. There's a lot of conservatives are like, I don't know if Kavanaugh's really got what it takes to stay, as an originalist. People are very dissatisfied with Roberts. And so, whoever this is, it's going to be a very shaky situation where I don't think Republicans are going to say, oh, well, we got it, 6-3, it's over, good, goodbye, Roe v. Wade.
Well, I can't challenge that, right? Because that's those are your thoughts and what your feelings on how people feel about Roberts. But he was nominated by George W. and he, I think he sided more with the right than the left. But yeah, I think that this is a lit a fire under a lot of people on the left, and we saw that with the money pouring in over the weekend, and a lot of people scared to death that they're about to lose their rights. So I
Right.
personally just think it's more motivating for people to try to get back the 5-4 lead on the left than it is for 7-2 and really cement the conservative. That's just me personally. I don't know.
Okay.
I always feel that winners kind of rest on their laurels a little bit, right? Like back-to-back championships are so rare because I just think people kind of like, well, we won. It's not as motivating as, God damn it, we want to win, So it's just me.
Well, no, that's I heard that from another friend today, like that I talked to today, a Democrat who said the same thing, and I was just like, to me, I just hadn't even like considered that or anything, because I actually think that a couple of things are going to be far more important than that, including so what I just said, plus this has exposed the Democrats for being court packers. Wanting to add states, not because it's best for the country, but for partisan reasons, wanting to end the filibuster, wanting to make serious structural, fundamental, permanent changes for just a short-term partisan advantage. I don't think that's going to play well. I don't think the American people like court packers. And expanding the Supreme Court number of justices just for partisan reasons. I don't think that's very appreciated by the American people. I don't think that's going to go well for them. But more importantly, this all depends on what are the Democrats going to do to this nominee. And so if they do anything close to what they did to Justice Kavanaugh, oh, there's going to be so much blowback. Like what they did to Kavanaugh was so grotesque and horrible, and that really upset the American people. And that's one of the reasons, people forget this. The Republicans expanded their majority in the Senate in 2018. 2018 was not some blue wave. Republicans actually gained more seats in the U.S. Senate in 2018. And a lot of that was because of the Kavanaugh situation. And so if the Democrats pull something like they did on Kavanaugh, like that's going to be way more influential. And just the fact of a Supreme Court confirmation hearing, this is going to remind the American people of what the Democrats did to Kavanaugh. It's going to remind the American people of what the Democrats did to Justice Thomas and Bork and all of this other stuff. And so I think that is going to be way more influential and powerful in terms of affecting the vote than some super hardcore analysis of how many votes are on the Supreme Court for which position.
Yeah, that's fair. I think you're right in that the treatment of this Supreme Court justice will have more of an impact than people thinking about the number of justices. I do agree with that. I would just say that one pushback Democrats will say in regards to 2018 and the Senate is that the seats that were up for grabs were more favorable to the Republicans. So what did we lose? We lost a seat in Missouri and to Josh Hawley. I mean, that's pretty red state at this point. And we also lost South Dakota with Heitkamp. So, the losses we obtained weren't exactly like flipping the bluest of seats. So that would just be my little pushback there. As you can see, the map is much more favorable right now to the Democrats. So it does work both ways. And yeah, somebody brought up Arizona. Arizona's gone from 2 Republican senators to 2 blue senators essentially now. So there, I personally, and maybe you could say maybe I'm just making up excuses, and that'd be a fair criticism. I personally believe just that 1/3 of the Senate that was up for grabs in 2018 was more favorable to the Republicans, and it is what it is. But I have heard your argument, and I have heard many people say that this was giving the Republicans in the Senate the go-ahead to do what they had to do. So let's back up a little bit here, and I'm so curious to ask you about this, dude. Let's talk about this open seat and comparing it to what happened in 2016 and now. There is a lot of anger on the left about this new precedent that was set. And I know you're going to say, well, the precedent was set from history that whenever there never was a Supreme Court justice seat filled when it was an election year and the president's party was different from the Senate's. And us on the left would say to that, yeah, and that's like me saying I don't date redheaded women because I've never had a redheaded girlfriend, right? It just never happened. I never met someone with red hair that I wanted to date. And that's what the precedent basically was. And it was more of a focus, in my opinion, on putting myself back in 2016. It's an election year, right? And so now here we are in another election year, and we're seeing all these same Republicans saying, no, it's okay this time, and leaning on the fact that, like you said, they feel they have a mandate from 2018 with the Senate wins, and that the things changed because of the way Kavanaugh was treated. But all that being said, let's just talk about fairness. And you're somebody that I know we get along fine. Doesn't this feel kind of dirty to you, what the Republicans are doing?
I don't think it's any dirty or hypocritical than the Democrats. The Democrats in 2016 said that it's the Senate's duty to vote on the nominee. And the Democrats went as far as to say that the Republicans stole that seat by not voting on that nominee. And so now Democrats are going back and being hypocritical to what they said in 2016. And now Democrats are all of a sudden saying, oh, it's not the Senate's duty. It's not the Senate's constitutional job to vote on nominee. It's not stealing the seat. And it's like, so I think this the narrative and the way you set that question up is totally consistent with what the way the mainstream media is playing and the Democrats are playing it, which is this sole focus on the Republicans are being hypocritical without any mention of the fact that the Democrats just flip-flopped just as hard. I mean, the Democrats literally said that the Senate's constitutional duty is to vote on Supreme Court nominees in 2016, and that not doing so was, quote, stealing the seat. So what? Are Democrats now trying to steal this seat?
Well, but I would just argue there's a difference between words and actions. No, I mean, the Republicans controlled what was going on. And per the Constitution, the Senate has the role of advising and consent of a Supreme Court pick, whether or not it's an election year or not. It doesn't say anything about that in the Senate rules or the Constitution. So this was a new rule created by the Republicans in control in 2016. And I think Democrats, there wasn't much they could do. And so they accepted it. Now, are people going to cry about it and say mean things? Sure. But in the end, the Republicans set the rule. And again, I just say that the real justification back then was that it's an election year. So, I know I'm not here to point fingers. Trust me. I understand where you're coming from. And I think we just have a difference of opinion on that. But in the end, I just say, is the cost of getting this seat worth it? You know what I mean? I wonder what happens to our country, because you and I both know the fight that's about to come in this confirmation process in the Senate. This is nothing, right? We both know how nasty things are about to get. And I just kind of wonder, why not wait till after the election? You know what I mean?
Well, look, what happened in 2016 is basically the Republican Senate was put there to try to stop Obama and to try to stop his nominees. So they were following the will of the voters then. And the Senate does not have to approve a nominee. Look, if there's 51 senators to vote against Trump's nominee, great. That's how it works. This is a political confirmation battle. The Republicans had the votes then. Republicans have the vote now. you can say it's unfair, but it's really no more unfair than just the Republicans control the Senate, and so
Well, well, I just would make a point. You saying they have the votes, but we never got a vote. You know what I mean? We never got a chance. We never had a hearing even.
well, right, but that's because there wasn't 51 votes to force it or to change Senate Majority Leader if
But
they didn't like it
would
or
wouldn't that have been a good PR move then to at least put the guy through the hearings and then just vote him down?
um it would certainly have made like this situation right now easier, but I still think like whether you argue that they should have had a vote on him or whether they just should have never considered him. Either way, it was just the Republicans rejecting the nominee, and the Senate rejected that nominee. Whether the Senate rejected that nominee by not having a vote or whether the Senate rejected the nominee by having a vote and voting no, it's the same thing. It's just the Senate rejecting the nominee. But to answer your question more directly about do you really think it's worth it to push this through, the answer is absolutely yes. I mean, the Democrats have already, even before this, the Democrats have been talking about adding all of these new states just for partisan reasons. And Democrats have been talking about packing the courts, since the 30s with FDR. And recently they've talked about packing the courts too. And look, we're in a battle for the Constitution of the United States right now. This is a battle to literally save the rule of law and to save our Constitution. And the Democrats, what they've done to Kavanaugh and what they've done to the court and politicizing the court, and just delegitimizing this whole entire process and politicizing what should have been, what ideally is not supposed to be super political. I get that it always has been, but the Democrats have already destroyed any goodwill that ever existed, and so this is all out political war, and I think that it's absolutely worth it to save the Constitution. And if the Democrats want to talk about packing the courts and adding seats, let them have at it. I do not think that's going to be politically popular for Democrats to openly call for packing the courts. I don't think the American people are going to like that.
Well, I'm not going to try to refute every point here. I would just say that as somebody who respects the Constitution, I felt that the Senate abdicated its duties in 2016 by not reviewing Eric Garland, not giving him a hearing. Their job is to advise and consent. And a lot of people feel like that on the left, that, hey, they didn't even give him a chance and they just ignored it for 10 months,
Okay.
like.
So let me ask you this then. If the Senate did the exact same thing right now, would you also say that this year they're abdicating their responsibility by not voting on Trump's nominee?
If that didn't happen in 2016 or accepting that it did?
Accepting that they didn't vote in 2016 on the nominee and you consider that an abdication of their constitutional duty, I'm asking you, if they did the exact same thing this time, would you also attack the Senate for not voting on Trump's nominee as abdicating their constitutional duty?
If I guess if they did not do it for a while and they simply hemmed and hawed, I would say yes.
Okay.
But I don't think pushing it through. I mean, I can't dismiss what happened in the past and that the Republicans said it's an election year, so we shouldn't be doing this. So, that comes to front of mind for me and saying, okay, fine. Now they've redefined what they feel their interpretation of the Constitution gives them room to do. So accepting that, I would say that this is not in line with that precedent that they set. So it's just my opinion on it.
So, like, you would want the Senate to vote on Trump's nominee, but just vote against him, or you don't want them to vote, or what?
If he didn't have the votes, I mean, either way, I think the Senate should give the person their hearing. I don't think the Senate should decide whether or not to give that person their hearing and votes. I disagree with what happened in 2016, just like I would disagree if they were stalling right now.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. Fair
But
enough.
I can't ignore what happened in 2016. So I actually have some ideas of how to fix this. I mean, why? I think you and I could probably both agree that I don't even think you have to pass a constitutional amendment for this, but you could pass a law since it's the Senate's rules to decide how they handle this stuff. But no Supreme Court justice confirmation hearings in an election year. I mean, would you be opposed to that in general moving forward?
I would be opposed to that because I think it
But
hamstrings.
you would or you wouldn't?
I would be opposed to it. I don't want to hamstring like I mean, I don't think that would be necessarily super effective because any Senate could then just change it, right? If I guess it depends on if it's an actual law or if it's a Senate rule.
Well, I would say it'd be a law that, just like we agree on the election date, stuff like that. These are laws that we've passed that go beyond just what the Constitution given the authority to the body to determine something.
No, I would be totally opposed to that. I mean, that totally is inconsistent with all American. You know that actually some presidents have actually nominated and confirmed Supreme Court justices after losing an election in an actual lame duck session. And there's been the vast majority of time. This is like, again, this is all stuff Democrats said in 2016. Democrats said in 2016 that, look, there's been lots of times where presidents have nominated justices in the last year of their presidency, and they always were voted on. They always were confirmed, and that's why they attacked the Republicans for not doing it, because they said, "Look at precedent, look at history. We're always supposed to do this." And so, and plus, I just think that would have really bad effects because then you end up with that pretty much guarantees you have not a full court for election litigation. Because if you do that, then any time that there's a vacancy in the last year, you're always going to have a partially empty court during an election, which, given all of the changes to our election laws over the last 30 to 40 years, pushed primarily by the left, that have resulted in lots and lots of lawsuits over elections, I think that's a dangerous situation to have potentially a 4-4 court almost guaranteed for elections.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, the lower court ruling would stand if they were to come to a 4-4 conclusion. That's a fair point, something to think about. I will say, though, in regards to your notion of Democrats are going to pack the courts and all that, that would be changing the number of justices on the court. And I mean, isn't it fair to say that that's what the Republicans did in 2016 by reducing it to 8 for almost a year?
Well, I don't. They have never actually passed a law that said that the Supreme Court shall only be 8 justices. I mean, the Supreme Court has been 9 justices since I think the 1860s.
Well, I would say they went even further then, and did it without a law, did it on their own accord. And the Supreme Court number of Supreme Court justices has changed 5 or 6 times, maybe more over the years. It's never been set in stone. It's not in the Constitution, and so you can change it by withholding a seat for a year. I would say that's a bit of a power grab, in my opinion, too.
Well, I'm not going to disagree that it was a power grab and that it was political. I mean, the hilarious thing is that this is political. The court has been politicized ever since FDR's court packing plan in the 30s, and so and it's gotten more so since the Democrats borked Robert Bork, and so this is a political situation. And it's like, is it unfair? Is it unfair that Republicans controlled the Senate in 2016 and the Republicans control the Senate now? Maybe it's unfair. Maybe it's not. Maybe that's just how the American people voted, and the Republicans control the Senate, so the Republicans win. And it's like, I don't think the Republicans have any duty whatsoever to Democrats to be all super fair-minded and never get too political and never do anything unfair. When the Democrats never give the same, to the Republicans.
Well, I see where you're coming from, and I don't disagree about Bork. I think that was the opening salvo in creating this contentious process. I mean, somebody like Antonin Scalia was approved 98-0, so there was a time when we got along on these things and we could approve people, right? So I do think it's possible to get back to that. And but how would you feel if, like, I could see a scenario where, let's say, the Democrats win the Senate, on November 3rd, and Donald Trump wins re-election, and they simply never seat anybody he puts up for 4 years. I mean, wouldn't they have the precedent to do that? Election year be damned. Why not do it for 4 years?
Well, they could do that, and I would say that it's wrong and that it's improper and that they should do it. But that's just a political that's a political question. It's like if the American people put Democrats in control of the Senate and reelect Donald Trump, you could argue that that's what they wanted to happen.
Sure.
And I think that the way that you would defeat that is political. Is you would have to make an argument to the American people that, hey, look, the Democrats they're never gonna approve any judges or justices from Trump between 2020 and 2022, and this is really bad for the country because we need our courts to be filled, and the Republicans would have an obligation to make that case to the American people in 2022.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, but that definitely could be 2 years of not even like giving him his cabinet picks and stuff. I think it could just be bad. So it kind of leads me to my next question, whether or not we can agree on what's fair or not. But I think we can both agree that this process has gotten out of control. These justices are being on there for probably too long. I'm sure you would have liked to have seen Ginsburg stepped down years ago. And the idea of some of these people serving for 40 years doesn't appeal to both of us. And I don't think our founding fathers had that vision either. I think people served for an average of 17 years or something back when they came up with this lifetime appointment idea. And there's no other Western democracies that have their highest court with lifetime appointments. They all have some sort of term limits, and term limits is something that I hear a bipartisan agreement on. So I'd be curious to hear if you have any thoughts on how do we fix this, like, and not just blaming sides or whatever. Like, it is what it is, right? The reality of the situation is this is contentious. It rips our nation apart every single time one of these come up. So do you have any thoughts on how we fix this besides just retribution?
Absolutely. I think that the Supreme Court has to be the ones to fix this because it's the Supreme Court that did this to themselves. And the Supreme Court made the Supreme Court political by making political Supreme Court decisions like Roe v. Wade, which was not based in the Constitution, was an activist ruling from the Supreme Court that removed a political issue from a state by state political decision to now it's a nationwide constitutional provision where the American people no longer have a say on this issue. And if the Supreme Court would go back to being faithful to the original meaning of the Constitution, there would be no reason to make this thing political, because the entire reason that this has got political is because the Supreme Court has control over political questions and political issues. And so if the Supreme Court were to go back from that, you wouldn't have all this issue. It's just like the best way to get money out of politics is to cut the federal budget. The only reason people are willing to spend so much money on politics is because these politicians have control over so much money. And so I think that would be the way to fix this, would be to get that's why I think, if the originalists can actually take back the court and let's say Roe v. Wade gets repealed, that doesn't mean that abortion is illegal. That means that states can decide on their own. And I guarantee you California, New York, and all the other blue states would continue to have legal abortion, and there would be no impact whatsoever. There would literally be no impact whatsoever, zero impact on states like California and citizens of those states if Roe v. Wade was overturned. The only thing that it would do would be allow states like Montana to put in restrictions on abortion. And then you would go back to the way our country was intended to work, which is where you have each state making a different state by state decision. And abortion is legal in California. Abortion's illegal in Montana. And if you want to live in a state with legal abortion, you move to California. If you want to live in a state without legal abortion, you move to Montana. And that I think would depoliticize the court, and nobody would care anymore about who was on the court, because the court would no longer be the ultimate decision maker on political issues.
Well, there's a lot to respond to there. I think a lot of people would respond to you with the "just move" meme, saying it's not so easy for a lot of people to move. You know what I mean? It could be troublesome. But
True.
but you're saying so your solution is for but how are you going to take away these rulings from these justices? I don't understand how are they going to depoliticize themselves when that's the environment they were born in? You know what I mean? Like, do you feel continuing to pack it with certain type of justices then, or continuing to fill? I don't want to say pack, but there's a negative connotation, but just continuing to fill those seats with a certain type of justice is the solution then?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay. So then I would just say that, okay, that may be possible years from now, right? But I think it's fair to say that there very well could be a Democrat getting back in there who doesn't agree with that philosophy. And it does keep going back and forth 5-4, 5-4, 5-4, 5-4. And so how do we calm the nation down on just the process as it is right now in the meantime before we get to that point, if we ever do, of what you're talking about? Do you think there's anything?
I don't know. I don't think you can really. I really don't. I don't really see any way to do it. I mean,
Okay.
do you?
I do. I think term limits has to be discussed first and foremost. I think if people knew that these justices could only serve for 18 years, for example, which is a term limit that a lot of Americans agree upon, Republican and Democrat, then that may calm tensions down. I just don't like how it tears our country apart every time we have one of these openings, right? It doesn't have to be like this. And like I said, going back to when our Constitution was first written, I don't think our founding fathers had the idea that people would serve on the highest court in the land for 40 years. And I give the example of other Western nations just don't do that, right? So I don't think it has to be like this. And I think that's one idea, term limits. And I never really get much pushback on that. So do you have an issue with term limits for the Supreme Court?
Not at all. No. I agree with term limits. I agree with term limits for senators and representatives and term limits for the Supreme Court as well. I think that's a great idea. I just don't think that in and of itself is going to depoliticize the court. I mean, it
Okay.
may ultimately help us get there by sort of reducing the political power of the court over time. But I don't think that in and of itself. I mean, how is term limits in and of itself going to make the Supreme Court less political? If the Supreme Court is still the decider of hot button political issues, I
Mhm.
mean it's still gonna be super political because it's going to have the power to decide hot button political issues, even if you got term limits.
I I just don't see how they stay out of hot button political issues. So, like for abortion, for example, you've got people trying to pass certain laws in states, and it gets challenged and it gets set up to the Supreme Court eventually. So, I just don't see how they avoid hot button issues like that.
Well, I think they would avoid it by saying, "Hey, look, abortion is a political issue for the states to decide. We're not going to get involved in this. We're not gonna guarantee anybody. We're not going to overturn the will of the people and force you to have legalized abortion. And we're not going to do the opposite of that either. We're not going to be involved. Whatever a state wants, if California wants it to be legal, great. If Montana wants it to be illegal, great. And we're not going to interfere in it." And there's actually a doctrine called the political question doctrine, which the Supreme Court has declined to hear cases on because they're political questions. But it's not as widely of enforced doctrine as I think it ought to be.
I gotcha. Yeah, I mean, look, it comes down to fundamental vision for what the court should be doing, and it's an interesting conversation, right? A lot of people on the left will push back and say, well, okay, so states should be able to decide gun rights, and then people will say the Second Amendment, and then, on and on and on. All these other
Right.
issues come up. You know what I mean?
Well, let me ask you this: Do you think that there are other issues about the Supreme Court or related to the Supreme Court that really fires up Democrats other than abortion, or do you think I'm right that it's basically mostly abortion?
Well, I think a lot of people now are starting to focus on healthcare, and actually, the Democrats in the Senate are kind of focusing people on that, saying this isn't about abortion. This is about the ACA, and I do think that's kind of catching on with the pandemic because a lot of people have lost their health insurance, and realizing that the Republican Party is trying to eliminate the ACA without any alternative. Right? Donald Trump keeps saying in 2 weeks, 2 months, I'll have something, but it's just up in the air what they'll have. So on the left, they're starting to frame it as the ACA and healthcare, and I think gay rights are something that people care about now, and what's going on with immigration. So I do think it has expanded beyond just abortion on the left. I wonder if it's expanded beyond just abortion on the right. That's the real question for me.
I think it has. I think Roe v. Wade is just like symbolic of judicial activism, sort of as a whole. You know,
Well,
whether,
can I just say, I just remind people that Roe v. Wade was decided 7-2. It was overwhelmingly popular.
well, popular on the Supreme Court or popular amongst the American people.
I would argue both. I don't have the figures for the people, but I mean, 7-2 is not a 5-4 split decision, and the Supreme Court tends to represent the people to some degree, right?
I don't think it does. I mean, that's
It was
part of the
about
problem.
liberty. It was really about liberty at the time and what women can do with their body if you read the majority opinion, right?
Um, yeah, that's what they couched it as, but they overturned in doing that, they overturned and nullified a bunch of state laws that were passed by the representatives of the people of those states.
Sure. I can't argue that. But I mean, what besides abortion gets people fired up on the right when it comes to the judiciary?
I
Is
think
there
this,
anything?
yeah, I think the Second Amendment. I mean, it's tough for me because like I'm kind of a wonk when it comes to it. So like for me, I get really fired up about the Commerce Clause and interstate commerce,
Okay.
and Wickard v. Filburn and the Fourth Amendment, searches and seizures, the administrative state, the non-delegation doctrine, the Second Amendment, First Amendment, free speech, religious rights, freedom of religion. Things like that, I would say. But I think, obviously abortion is a big one. But I think maybe like for your average American, I think it's a matter of who gets to decide. I don't think average Americans like it that they don't have any input on laws. It's just whatever nine people think. And so all of these people in a state could, pass restrictions on abortion, and then 9 lawyers in Washington D.C. get to declare it null and void. I don't think that strikes many people as fair.
Well, and this is an argument I've heard about the number of justices that are currently there. I've read articles that talk about increasing the number of justices to 100. Let's have a lot more representation on the highest court in the land and putting term limits in there also. Would you be opposed? I know you said you're not interested in court packing, but as you just stated, 9 people don't really represent 330 million of us. So I feel like it's time to increase the number of justices anyways, just in general. No?
I don't think that the court would be able to function properly. I think 9 is kind of a good number for the court to function, and it shouldn't matter if the court is quote unquote representative of the people. Like, that's a political issue. Like, you want politicians to represent the people. Like, that's not what a judge's job is to do. A judge's job is not to represent the people. A judge's job is to, interpret the law and make legal rulings that are, it's not supposed to be, like, that's the thing about the Supreme Court. It's not supposed to be making decisions based on what's popular amongst the people or what the will of the people is. Like, the Supreme Court is supposed to be making decisions based on the law, including the Constitution, and then the Supreme Court makes laws or makes rulings and judgments based on the original intent of the Constitution, and then if the people disagree with it, then they can amend the Constitution. But I don't think,
Well,
the Supreme Court's not there to like sort of just change the meaning of the Constitution over time based on what the 9 people on the Supreme Court think is the will of the American people.
yeah, I hear you. I just think that there's some broad things in the Constitution that you can lean either way on, right? Like when it comes to liberty, that starts to get mixed into a lot of things in our lives, right? So it's a tough one.
For
It's tough.
sure.
I am curious about DC though. You had mentioned that the Democrats are interested in pushing for statehood for DC, and that's kind of a negative thing. So I would just ask you, I mean, these people have no representation. I think there's like a million people that live in the DC area. What is supposed to happen? I mean, these people have no representation
Sure
in
they do.
Congress.
They've got a city government there. But they're not supposed to. Like they're like it's the capital of the United States. It was specifically designed by the founding fathers to be the District of Columbia. It's the capital of the United States. It's not supposed to be a state or in a state. It's not, you don't want the capital of the United States to be in a state or a state itself, for very important reasons, including influence and power and how that impacts the national debate and Congress and the Senate and the House and everything like that. And so I think this whole idea about making D.C. a state is just patently partisan. Democrats want to make Washington D.C. a state so they can get 2 more Democrat senators. It's a short-term partisan move, and I don't think anybody really cares about the people in Washington, D.C. not having representation. I mean, the people in Washington, D.C., most of them work for the federal government. They're making way more money than their private sector counterparts all across the rest of the country. And, you know, again, if they don't want to live in Washington, D.C., nobody's forcing them to live there. And if they really want to have their own senator and representative, they don't have to live there.
I don't have the information in front of me of the number of people that work in the public sector versus private that live there, but I would just say, again, this goes back to the just move meme, and it's not so easy, right? People have their roots down in a place, and whether or not it's appropriate that people live in the capital, they're there, right? And we've got a million of these Americans who live there. Now, would you be opposed to expanding Maryland and shrinking the District of Columbia to just like 1 square mile or whatever it is, and allowing these people to at least be represented by existing state?
No, I think Washington D.C. is wonderful exactly the way it is, and the way it's been since, the 1700s.
Now let me ask you a question, and I don't know how you're going to answer it, but what if it was a Republican leaning area and you saw those people had no representation? Would you feel the same way? What if you lived there?
I don't know. Maybe I would. Maybe I really. It's hard to say. I mean, these are all like.
So why
First
does
of all,
party
I don't
affiliation have anything to do with it? It
because
comes down
we're
to
talking.
fairness.
Yeah, but
No?
again, I don't view this idea of being fair to Democrats when it's Democrats versus Republicans. This is a political war for the Constitution and the country and everything else, and the Democrats are never fair to Republicans. So I don't think of this like, oh, we have to be fair to the Democrats, so fair to the Democrats. It's like if we lived in a situation where the Democrats were fair to the Republicans and the Republicans were fair to the Democrats, that's great, but that's fantasy land. Like, this isn't fairness we're talking about here. This is political. So, if there was a like, it's like this is, I wouldn't. Here's the real answer. I don't like this. I don't like going down this route of making huge structural, significant, permanent changes for partisan reasons. And so, look, if the Democrats want to split California into 3 states just so that they can have 6 senators, then the Republicans can come back and say, okay, we're going to split Montana into 3 states, so we have 6 Republican senators out of Montana or any other, state. I don't think that's a good road to go down. And it's like, if the Democrats split California into 3 states to gain a bunch of more Democrat senators, would I oppose it? Yes. Would I then support splitting a Republican state into 3 to get 6 more Republicans? Yes. Is that fair? no, it's not fair. It's we're talking partisan politics here. I'm a proud Republican. I think Republicans' view of the country and where we're going is what's best for the country, and I'm willing to fight for that. And I have no problem picking a side and being on a team and fighting for what I think is right. You know what I mean?
I hear you. Yeah, no, I can't push back on that. The interesting thing I think is that we both have the same goal, right? We both want this country to be a wonderful place and everybody have what they need and have access to all they need, right? We just have different ways of getting there. So I'm always curious, like you're saying that it's a partisan thing, but I don't think it has to be like this, right? I think that there are solutions to make this less partisan. But like I mentioned, Antonin Scalia, how was he confirmed 98-0? And this wasn't in the like 1800s or something, right? This is in the modern era. So, you know what I mean? There are ways to get along with each other. We don't have to be at each other's throats. So I'm always just kind of looking for those solutions, you know?
Well, I think that's great, and I think honestly, you have to ask yourself, why are we so divided right now, and why did we're not so divided before? And I mean, so for example, with like the Scalia appointment and stuff, it used to be that politicians or senators had a standard for Supreme Court nominees, which is, they're qualified and they have a good temperament. And even if I don't agree with them politically, or I don't agree with them in terms of their judicial philosophy, I'll still vote for them if they're qualified and they have a judicial temperament. Whereas now you're starting to see way more litmus tests from both sides and division. And I agree with you that I think me and you probably do have like the similar goals and just different ways to get there. But I think there is a significant disconnect on the goals that people have in terms of maybe the far left and, Trump supporters, or the far right, or normal Americans even, versus the far left. I think there is a disconnect between the actual goals. And so, you could characterize it as the difference between equality of opportunity versus equality of outcome type of thing. And so I think the way that we fix that, well, I think there's only one way to fix that, and that one side has to win. And so
Really?
like that's like historically, like our country has gone through like periods of a lot of division